And now, your feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled movie review. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck, alongside not Eric today. We have a very, very special guest. Eric is dealing with some family stuff right now, so please go show him some love. But we have a wonderful guest stepping in for Eric. You may know her from Kind of Funny. She is one half of the Movie Bros. She is Christmas in March, Joey Noelle.
Hello. Thank you for having me back. It's so fun to be able to talk with you about movies and especially this one.
I know. I feels like there's a theme kind of in the movies that you pop up and review with us. Because last time was Promising Young Woman. Not exactly, but I mean, it's
I,
interesting. I can't wait to talk
there's a
about this with
thread
you.
that connects all of these together.
Joey, how are you doing? How are
I'm
things?
good. I'm excited that everybody finally gets to watch this movie. I saw this at
Mhm.
Sundance a few months ago, however long it was. So I've
Yes.
just been sitting here waiting for everybody else to experience this because this is a movie that like people are like, "Oh, how was it?" And you can't really say a whole lot because I feel like the less you know going into it, the better. But I'm excited to see little bits and pieces popping up in my timeline now that people are getting a chance to watch it.
That is a great point. So just to kind of give, if you haven't watched this movie yet, and Joey put it perfectly, it's best to go in like without knowing anything about it. Because I feel like half of it is kind of the surprise of certain plot elements and different things like that, and just the wild turn it takes. So if you haven't seen the movie, I mean, Joey and I will give our quick, like, completely, we're not even going to tell you what the movie's about, but like if you should watch it or not, which I think we're both on the same page about. But like, I would suggest just pausing this, going to watch it, and then coming back because I think Joey and I are going to talk about some plot details that Joey, I haven't even seen the trailer. Do they give, without saying what it is, do they give away what the movie's about in the trailer?
Yeah, so I
Okay,
have
so
been telling people not to watch the trailer.
yeah.
There's like a little snippet. I think that was maybe on the IMDb for a while.
Yes, the plot synopsis here that
Yeah,
kind
and that
of
was
is a good
pretty
one.
much
Yeah.
all I was telling. Like, if you're in based on that, then I don't think you
Yeah.
should watch anything.
So I'll read that. The story chronicles of Noah, a young woman who meets Steve at the grocery store by defiant battle to survive her new boyfriend's unusual appetites with horrors of modern dating. So if that appeals to you, I would say go check out the movie and come back because Joey and I are going to go kind of full spoilers in this review. Because even if we tried to dance around things, it'd be one very hard to talk about, and I just don't feel like you can talk about it in detail that way, so you wouldn't get a great review. So quickly, Joey, I want your thoughts first. You saw it back at Sundance. We won't say anything else, but should people? It's streaming on Hulu in the US, Disney Plus. Sebastian Stan doing some interesting Disney Plus content in Canada.
Yeah.
Should people check this out on streaming?
Uh I think it's 100% worth checking
Yeah.
out on streaming. The barrier for this is so low. I mean, I do have to admit I am a Sebastian Stan fan.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I'll pretty much watch everything that he's in at this point. But I think it's 100% worth watching if that little snippet is at all piques your interest.
I would absolutely agree with that. I will go into more detail of that. I'm not like 1,000% sold on the movie. I think it is rough around the edges, but I think that there is enough there that is absolutely a, like Joey said, like it's just on streaming. It's probably one of the better streaming titles that have dropped recently of just like a good genre movie that you can pop on and be caught off guard by. So I think with some fun performances and some wild turns, I think that it is easily, if you're looking and you're like either a genre or a horror fan or just kind of like weird movies, like I think you will kind of dig this. So without saying anything more, you should pause this and go watch it and come back because Joey and I are going to spoil the shit out of this movie. First, you guys can also check out the screencast episode I did with Joey and Tim Geddes over on Kind of Funny, where we talk about some similar content with like Yellow Jackets, and we talked about the After Party, which the finale is out today. You guys can
Ooh.
go watch that. I think we'll have a spoiler cast for that sometime this weekend once Eric is good to be recording again. I talked about Last One Laughing Canada and a bunch of different things. I think the last couple episodes of that dropped as well, so you guys should go check that on the Kind of Funny channel. And then we'll also have reviews for Turning Red next week, as well as that should be on Monday for people looking for that. And I think we have some couple other things, but I don't know. But Joey, let's get into it. You saw this back at Sundance.
I did.
How was your Sundance experience? And was this just because it was a Sebastian Stan movie that you're like, okay, this is on my list of things to watch?
Yeah, pretty much. Sundance, I had a really great time. This is my first time doing any sort of like digital film festival or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I know it was a little bit annoying because they had to flip it after I had made my initial selections. When they decided to go all digital, so I had to like redo my entire schedule, included like buying a couple one-off movies, including
Weird.
Fresh, just because they didn't line up with like my day pass anymore. But this was definitely one of the driving factors in doing digital Sundance. Me and my friend Carolyn were like, have you done this before? This seems fun. There's enough movies that are on this roster that I think are going to be good, that'll be worth doing. So we ended up watching this one together. We like synced our watches and we're like in Discord typing back and forth. So it was fun in a like, especially that back in January, like we hadn't really been going back to movie theaters for a ton of screenings and stuff like that yet. So it was fun to kind of have that experience of watching movies with people again.
Nice.
But yeah, this was a driving force in us doing it. I had a lot of fun. Daisy Edgar-Jones, I feel like I've seen bits and pieces of. I still haven't finished Normal People. Is that what she's in?
Yes, Normal People, yeah.
But I really liked her in this Sebastian Stan. I thought I just like whenever he gets a chance to do things that are like outside of the realm of what he normally does. So I feel like between this and Pam and Tommy and like The Bronze or maybe like the trifecta of like wild Sebastian Stan roles. It was fun to see just the journey throughout it. Like the fact that we get 40 minutes into this movie and then you get the title screen, you're
I
like,
love that.
Oh, okay. So this is where we're starting, and it's great.
Yeah, I'm pretty much with you. Like I went in knowing, so we are in full spoilers, everyone. So I went in knowing the movie was about cannibalism, and that's pretty much like I kind of got that vibe from the poster and then the description. I'm like, oh, I kind of understand where this is going, and I think I heard a little bit at Sundance about what people said. Like, go in, try to know as little as possible, and you'll probably have a wild time with this. And for the most part, I did. I think it's rough around the edges. I think it's maybe trying a bit too hard at times. And I think it is tonally awkward. Although I think that the satire, like I get that it's satire, but it's a fine balance of undercutting kind of some of the more disturbing moments and what the movie is ultimately about with some scattered things that I'm like, ooh, that maybe was one step too far, whether it's him like, you know, singing and dancing in the kitchen, like pounding the meat and stuff like that.
Did you see his Instagram story?
No, I didn't.
It might have been an Instagram reel where he like posted and it was him doing a very similar thing. But like he said, I sent this to, I think it must have been Mimi Cave or maybe it was Lauren, the director, after I got the part. And at first when I saw it yesterday, I was like, that's weird. And then rewatching the movie today, I'm like, oh, this was the inspiration for that whole scene. It's just like, there's so much dancing in this movie. Who would have thought?
Yes, that's what I mean. And I'm cool with that. I just feel like when you try to kind of mix that with, I think this movie is genuinely disturbing at times. I think I was incredibly uncomfortable throughout a lot of it.
But for totally different reasons.
Yes, absolutely. And I feel like when moments like that popped up, and I think Sebastian Stan is fantastic casting because I think those first 40 minutes when it's basically like a romance, like not a romantic comedy, but like kind of like a romantic comedy in those first 40 minutes. And the movie does such a good job at just kind of you buying into it. And if you didn't know what this movie was about, like, I think you would just think it was about this, you know, woman who's going through online dating and meets this guy. And like, funny story, like that's what Nevis thought this movie was. And I had to, before we watched, and she does not do well with like gore and violence and disturbing content. She just really doesn't like it. So we're about to watch this movie and I go, Nevis, before we start, because I think you'd get a great reaction, but do you know what this movie's about? And she was like, isn't it like Sebastian Stan and a girl like fall in love or whatever? And I'm just like, oh no. And I'm like, I don't want to spoil it for you, but I think it's about this. And she's like, oh no, no, no. And she's just like, had to look up the trailer. And I'm like, I feel like those 40 minutes when I was watching it, I'm like, oh, you'd really love the first 40 minutes of this movie. But
Yeah.
then right at that title card, which Joey mentioned, which is like the title card comes in 40 minutes into the movie when the big twist happens, when he drugs her, which I'm all for. I love ridiculous things like that, stylistic things like that, that make you spend so much time with them and him being a nice guy that you're like, you're in it. And then when that happens, even though it is predictable, it's still kind of, you go, okay, this movie is taking a turn, and it does.
Yeah, for sure. When we were watching it at Sundance, Carolyn and I were talking and we were looking at the like description and like the way that they were categorizing it stuff. And we were looking at it, we're like, why does it say action in the description? We're like,
Interesting.
that's weird. But then you get to the last, like, what, 20 minutes of it, and you're like, oh, that's why. But that's kind of what you're talking about, where like it feels like so many different things at the
Yes.
same time shoved into one movie, where it's like, oh, okay, this is getting a little bit messy, but it's also fun, so I'm not mad about it.
And that's exactly it. I think messy is a good word. And like, I feel like there's a lot of really, really good stuff in this. I just think it's tonally all over the place, which some movies can balance that. And I feel like this movie does a pretty good job at balancing them all, because I did feel every feeling you're talking about, where one moment I'm like, oh my God, this is like hard to watch. And then another moment you're laughing because it's like American Psycho. He's just kind of like being a psychopath kind of thing, like singing and dancing and smashing someone's leg meat into like a board. And I'm just like, man, this movie goes pretty far. And like, and I know I obsess over it, but like Sebastian Stan being in Pam and Tommy and this, that are both on Disney Plus in Canada, are just so funny to me. Like, I know that they're kind of putting edgier content on the US soon too, Joey, with the Netflix shows and stuff, and they're putting parental warnings on things. But it's just, I'm like, all right, Sebastian Stan, the face of just very graphic things on Disney Plus. But like, I really liked Daisy Edgar-Jones, and is that her name? Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. And I felt like the movie did a really good job of Noah's story and just like cheering for her through the entire thing. Like, I really, even if it got into some of those more predictable moments after the twist, where I'm like, okay, I kind of see where this movie's going, like the wife thing and like all of that kind of stuff. I'm like, originally, the other woman who's in the separate cell beside
Oh,
her, who
yeah.
I thought was not great. Like, it sounded like it was like a bad voice actor at
Yeah.
times. I was like, oh, that sounds like the wife.
Which is a
So right when
bummer, because she's from Kim's Convenience and I like her so
Really?
much.
Oh, there you go. CanCon connection.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I was like, and maybe it's just the.
Oh, they shot this in Canada. I forgot.
Oh, did they really?
Yeah,
that's
because
so
Eric
interesting.
pointed out, go watch Eric's review on Rogers TV too, since he can't be here. He did a review that's up on his channel on rogerstv.com/cinemascene. And he wanted to shout out that, Joey, there's a drugstore called Shoppers Drug Mart in Canada. and Eric saw it in the background and he's like, it made me laugh. So I wanted to give that a shout out. So that's probably why she's in it.
Perfect.
They must have shot it
Yeah,
either
that
in
makes sense.
Toronto or around somewhere, Vancouver, maybe, something like that. But sorry, keep going. Yeah, she's from Kim's Convenience. I just thought I don't know, there was something off about that dialogue between her and the other woman in the cell.
Yeah, it was weird. I don't know if it was just like the character supposed to be processing and going back and forth, and like
That's fair.
this whole not Munchausen's, but what's the one where you fall in love with your kidnapper?
Stockholm syndrome.
There we go. Yeah. Like if it's supposed to be kind of touching on that kind of stuff or what it is. But yeah, I was like, this is not really working for me. But she's in it also kind of so minorly.
Oh, totally.
For most
Like,
of it,
it's
that I was
not
like, whatever.
Yes, exactly. I just felt like those scenes, I'm like, man, it just sounded like someone, like they weren't in the same room together and someone was just like recording the dialogue and like it being
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of 80 yard over. I actually really liked how the friends figured shit out right away too.
Yeah.
Like, I feel
Jojo
like
T.
that's
Gibbs,
something.
I think, is my
Yeah.
favorite part of this entire movie. She does a
Yeah.
good job of being like the audience of like, yes, we want you to do this. go live your life, but also these are flags. And being
That's
that voice in the movie.
That's exactly it, and I feel like that's kind of refreshing in, like, a horror movie or in a kidnapping movie or things like that. Like, so many times it's just like, yeah, the convenient thing of, like, cell phones don't work there or things like that, but I felt like everyone else was smart. Like, everyone in this movie is smart. Like, even Noah, who ultimately, gets kidnapped by this guy, isn't, like, an idiot. She's just a little bit more trusting because he's very suave and a nice guy, and she wants to believe in men not being shitty, like the
Yeah.
worst. And she finally feels like maybe she saw that, and I never once I'm like, you're an idiot, why would you go do this? Like, and even as it's happening, you can tell she's getting panicky about it because don't trust anyone, even nice guys. And I loved that the friends, Molly, and then even what was the other guy's name?
Oh, the
Paul, was it?
bartender.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
bartender. I like that they both felt really smart, and you don't get that. Like, they figured exactly what was happening out pretty quickly. Like, she just knew something was off, and that felt really believable, because I feel like too many times you're watching a horror movie or something like this and like you're like, why is everyone just the dumbest person alive? Like, and can't they go somewhere by themselves, or they can't figure things out? Like, I liked immediate she was like, yo, this isn't how my friend speaks through text
Yeah.
messages, like something's off.
Yeah, I'm not just gonna
And
go like on a technology purge. And like even the fact that she like reverse image searched the like waterfall picture and stuff. It's like,
exactly.
oh yeah, these are all my sleuthy friends that are being like, something's wrong here, and we got to figure this out.
Yeah,
And finding the
absolutely.
wife and bugging the Paul enough to get the real name and all of that
And that's
stuff.
exactly what I feel like people would do with their actual friends, right? Like,
Yeah.
I even when Nevis is taking an Uber home from the bar and she sends me the ride, I screenshot on my app just like the bartender did, because in case something happens, you want the person's name or the location that they were at and shit like that. It was like smart things that like modern people on the internet would actually do in this situation, and then
Hmm.
led to an interesting, confrontation and climax. Like, I don't love the stuff with the wife. But I mean,
Yeah.
the reveal there, I mean, I guess what I interpreted, that she was one of his like
Yeah.
prisoners, right? And then they, just like how he was falling in love with Noah, he actually,
Fell in love with
instead of
her.
her just trying to trick him, she actually was that Stockholm syndrome that you're talking about, right?
Yeah, her character's so interesting because I do think the reveal with her when you find out that she's an amputee, you're like, oh, this this is a
Yeah.
different kind of turn, because I was expecting that she would just be in on it with him, but not
Hmm.
expecting that she potentially was one of his victims. Um, but then she's all I don't her character motivations are interesting at the end, where like then she comes to the house and then she has the altercation with Noah, and I'm like, are you, so now you're fully in on this? And like, I don't
Yeah.
know, I feel like that
I
was
thought
very
she
much
was
like,
gonna
we'll
maybe
just skate
help.
over all of this. Yeah, I
Yeah,
did
I thought
too.
she was gonna help Noah or something like that. Like, she's finally, like, I know, and she jokes, not jokes, but she tries to trick her by saying like, "Oh, you finally got him, you finally got him," kind of
Hmm.
thing at the end. But then I get what they're trying to say with that, I guess, with like, women who are part of the problem and like support,
Yeah.
shitty men and stuff like that. But with her actually being a victim as well, or that's what's implied. But I guess it just goes back to, yeah, I guess he's so good at what he does, or what, and no one ever fell for it, and she was actually manipulating him. Like, I like all that, and even though, again, you can kind of see it coming from a mile away of what she's trying to do, but then that goes back to the characters actually being like intelligent and being like, okay, I'm actually going to get myself out of this situation, even if I have to, eat people and pretend that I enjoy this with him and kind of seduce him because he's this, shitbag moron. But like, yeah, and then some of that stuff is really kind of disturbing. Like, and I like stuff in movies too when there's like secret organizations, and even if it is fucked up stuff like this, but it's just like these really shitty men that order, you know, human meat to eat them through this
Yeah.
like the chef's plate kind of Hello Fresh kind of box is like really fucking weird.
Well, and the escalation that they take it of like, not only do they enjoy cannibalism, but like the attachment to the girls with
Yes.
the boxes and like the lingerie and the pictures and all that stuff is just like, oh man, this is deep, and this is going like another layer of like depraved and like kind of fucked up. Um,
Yeah.
but like you imagine that's obviously like if you're escalating to cannibalism, you're escalating a lot of other things too, and so it would make sense that you'd want it to be like the most creepy thing.
Oh yeah, and it's it's touching on actual real stuff of selling bath water and like
Totally.
different things online, which again a lot of that is consensual stuff that people decide to do on their own, and power to you if you can make money doing something and it's everyone's going, yeah, I agree to this, and that's fine. But it's just, I think it touches on like a lot of interesting thing and covering dating and just like and using this metaphor of like women's it's gross saying, but women's meat and stuff throughout this
Yeah.
movie is just like was really really uncomfortable. And I think that's some of the best stuff. Like I think when the movie is uncomfortable, it is at its best, and I kind of wish it kept that tone, even though I understand it's going for more of a satirical, like uncomfortably funny vibe throughout it. And we mentioned before we started recording, like Adam McKay is a producer, and I feel like a lot, even issues you see in some Adam McKay movies of recent, it's like that tonally awkward, like I get the message you're trying to tell us, it's just like maybe the way you told us that message, like in Don't Look Up, and even the Vice and things that he's done recently too, like you can kind of tell message movies that are very stylish, that are almost
Yeah.
very in your face to an intentional, amount, like that it's going to either be your thing or it's not. And like something like Don't Look Up, and I think this are kind of similar because they are like blunt force, trauma to your head of here's what the message that I'm trying to tell you. And then it tries to insert comedy and some stylistic cinematography that I don't think always works, but I think is ultimately very enjoyable and entertaining. Weirdly, like it is weirdly a fun movie, but it's also very uncomfortable.
It is a weird movie to categorize and to sell to people because there's so little you can say about it without spoiling, that
Mhm.
like any short sound bite that you're going to give somebody is, once they watch it, has the potential for them to be like, huh, that was an interesting recommendation once
Mhm.
you've seen everything. But yeah, it's messy, and the music that they have in it is kind of
Yeah.
weird, even though it's fun and I popped for
Yeah.
a lot of it. I'm just like, I don't really which I guess is like probably not all that unsimilar to Promising Young Woman in that sense, where I'm
Yeah.
like, why is there this Paris Hilton song in the middle? Like, I'm not mad about it, but it is just kind of weird given the context and like the messaging of this movie. But it's the trying to find the
Yeah.
levity, though I think that did a better job of balancing it out and not leaning so hard into like the campiness of things.
I agree. Like I feel like they are touching on the same thing while still being about very different things. But this, I honestly, when I watched Promising Young Woman the first time, I thought it was going to go that genre kind of horror route, and I liked that it kind of pulled back from that constantly, and it was like, no, we're actually going to take this a different route until the very end, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree that there are a lot of similarities there. And I think, female driven, like, movies touching on this subject are, important and fantastic. And, instead of just like white dudes making them all the time. And,
Yeah.
that's why I think like, I had a problem with kind of the tone of it, but obviously that's what Mimi K was going for. And, I feel at times it really, really works to the point where I'm like, man, I just never struggled with how I felt on a movie like this in a really long time. Like there's a lot that I really, really, really liked, and then a lot that I was like, ah, man, I just wish that wasn't in here, or that didn't work, or like the tone was all over the place. But like even that last act, like it is kind of as they're like fumbling around in the kitchen and all the different things, and I think the way that she seduces him and gets out of the situation is really interesting. But then when she
Yeah.
brings Molly into the fold and saves the other woman as well, that I think that whole last act, I'm like, maybe went on a little too long, and with the wife showing up and things like that. However, then I even like her using the keys as a weapon at the end, because even
Yeah.
that is just like such a
Well, when you
normal
have
thing that someone
Paul
would
and
do.
like you're trying to figure
Yeah.
out how all of these different pieces are fitting together, and they,
Yeah.
spoilers, don't really,
Yeah,
or
like
don't
Paul, like
well.
why Paul shows up, but then he just doesn't find them, right? Like it
Yeah,
just
I
ends
was
with them
expecting
in
it
the
to be like a Get Out moment where he
yes.
comes and like helps, but that didn't really happen. So I don't know.
But I
Looking
mean,
up,
maybe that's even something, right? Of like, okay, they don't need this guy to come help
that's
them,
true. Yeah.
like,
It's like that
which
would
I
have
think is
undercut the
interesting.
message maybe, or
And even the
something I
guy's name
didn't
being
realize.
Chad too. Just a little on the nose, but funny.
So this is written by Lauren Kahn, who
Okay.
apparently has been Adam McKay's assistant for a really long time,
Oh, okay. Good for
which is an
her.
interesting connection. I was just looking at her IMDb and she's credited as his assistant on like Step Brothers, The Other Guys, he's like a bunch of other stuff. So it's like, oh, maybe that's how this Motley
That's
crew kind
really
of fit
cool.
together.
Yeah. That is cool. You know, someone who's you worked their ass off probably as an assistant who probably wrote this script in her spare time and has probably been talking to him about it forever. And then
Yeah.
he finally was like, yeah, you know what? This is a really good script. I'll produce this and help you get this made. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah, it's nice when you
Um,
see people get like the support of their bosses for their passion projects, because I feel like there's probably so many people that work in the industry that have tried to get something like this and
oh,
people just
totally.
don't give
And
a fuck about it.
you're just an assistant or something, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna pay attention to you. Yeah, and I think that's cool because ultimately, why you take those kind of jobs is, like you said, to try to make it in the industry or maybe do whatever your passion is, and that's fantastic that she, him starting his own. After his split with Will Ferrell, he starts his own production company, and I thought it was interesting for his name to pop up here, and you can see some of his sensibilities there too that she probably took from working with him
Yeah, for
for
sure.
so long of balancing all those different tones and things like that. I thought the score was fun. Some of the cinematography stuff I talked about, I thought was a little too much at times of like, this like sitting on the tray or just all the different kind of random ass kind of
All
angles
of
they
the
would do. I'm like,
close-ups of mouths eating things.
yes, which a little bit of that I'm fine with, but I feel like too many times I'm like, all right, guys, we can just pull this back like a little bit, and I think I would have dug it even more. Um but ultimately, yeah, I think it's definitely worth watching, and I think that it definitely was entertaining all the way through, even if it is a bit rough around the edges, and I think that's totally okay.
Yeah. I think the fact that I think the performances are so solid, especially
Yeah, great
between the
casting.
leads and the supporting cast for the
hmm
most part, I think are really fun.
hmm
And I think that kind of pushes through any of the like weird parts about it.
hmm I
um,
absolutely agree.
but and I'm always gonna err on the side of liking things that are like fun but bad versus good and boring. And
Yes,
this definitely falls
absolutely.
on the fun and bad side of the scale.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think it has a little bit of both of those things, right? And I
uh,
think at least it's trying to do something like unique and different, and a topic that I don't think has been touched on in this way. Like we get a lot of like, you even said there's a lot of cannibal content this year, but
yeah, between
talking about
this and Yellow
CanCon,
Jackets, it's like, okay. We
but
have
I'm all
found the
for it.
new zombie trope for moving forward for 2022. Uh,
Absolutely,
but yeah, I
absolutely.
think it's totally worth watching. I think it's a fun watch. I think it's definitely something we haven't gotten yet this year in terms of like the tone of like we've gotten some horror stuff but nothing quite like this. So I think it's a fun like Friday night watch, especially if you have Hulu or Disney Plus
Yeah,
and it
and
doesn't
you
really
like
cost you anything.
genre horror movies because I think there's some really gross stuff in there too when it comes to the violence and different
But
things.
some
And
of
just
it is so non-realistic, which I find
yes.
so interesting. It's like,
And
oh,
that's almost what I told Nevis was like, I think mentally she wouldn't have loved it because she doesn't even like if it's not visually gory. Like if mentally she knows something gross is happening, that
yeah.
still messes her up. Where I'm like, the leg or the butt or the things that they like show don't look, they look rubbery, to be
They're
honest.
not going for a realistic thing. It looks super fake.
Although, like, the meatball and stuff like that, that stuff was gross because kind of like what it
Yeah.
is and like what he's making out of it. And I just thought it was interesting of her whole arc trying to like pretend that she was into it and then going back and like throwing up in her cell just because she had to do this to try to get out of that situation. I thought was actually really, really good.
Yeah,
Uh
and the getting the notes in the magazine of, like, finding
oh
those
right, yeah, that
pushes to
is cool
keep
too.
going, when you think that you've like lost all hope and you're just like, well, I guess instead of accepting kind of your demise, it's like,
Mhm.
no, even the women before, like, keep going, like,
Mhm.
you can do this.
Yes, I absolutely. I'm gonna give the movie a 3.5. I still think it's really solid. I just think that there was too many things holding it back from being like great for me, but I still definitely think it's worth watching. And I hope you guys have already watched it before you listen to us.
Yeah, on for Letterbox, I scored it a 4. I had a really good
Cool.
time. I think that half a bump probably, I would say on most things, if Sebastian Stan is in it, I'm probably gonna rate it like a half star higher than most
You know
people
what,
anyways.
Joey? We all have those. Eric and I joke of like if a movie's 90 minutes, automatic half star bump. Like it's just, and this is a nice just under 2 hours. So I never felt the length or anything. I was
No,
always like
didn't
engaged, but
feel
that's
too
good.
drawn out.
3.5 from me, 4 from Joe. The other thing I wanted to touch on quickly before we wrap up, I think it's cool that Disney is using Searchlight still as that kind of brand that will pick up weird or dark movies. Cause I was worried about that after they bought 20th Century Fox, like what they would do with Searchlight and if they would kind of avoid movies like this. And I think them buying this at Sundance for Hulu under Searchlight, I think is kind of interesting and cool that they're still doing that kind of stuff, because like I really thought that they would just kind of, I don't know what they were going to use Searchlight for. I thought they'd be almost like the minor leagues for Marvel and Disney and different things like that, or a one for
Is
you, one for
Searchlight the
me kind
one
of
where
thing.
they just announced that they're going to be picking up like a bunch of streaming films and only having a few
It's possible. I know
theater
they made a,
releases? I feel like I saw something like
yes, I
that this
think
week.
yes, both with 20th Century
Or
and
maybe it was that.
Searchlight. I think those are the brands that they're like the big tentpole ones like Planet of the Apes. I know you guys recently did the review
Oh,
on
so
that. Like
good.
those like the big brands for Fox, I think they will put in theaters, but a lot of them, like I watched No Exit last week. You guys can check out Eric and
Oh,
I's
I have
review.
that book, but I
Um
haven't read it yet.
it the movie's not great, Joe.
It's one of the,
It's
it's one of
one
those, it's
another one
on
of
my
those movies
thriller
that,
shelf that are all
yeah,
like very generic
exactly.
3-star
I heard the
reads.
book was good, but like the movie, I just felt it very generic. But that was a 20th Century Fox movie. This is a Searchlight. Both went to Hulu in the US and Disney Plus here on Canada. But I mean, which some people will be bummed about that those two brands are going mostly to streaming. But I still think that it's cool that they are like distributing movies like this, because as a family brand, they could have easily just kind of put Searchlight, on ice and not really done anything with it. And I've said for the longest time that like I think that's what I hope they use to entice like really good filmmakers to make stuff for Marvel and Star Wars is just go, okay, Taika Waititi, we'll do another Thor for us, and you can do whatever you want for Searchlight. You can make a Jojo Rabbit, you can
A
make a
3-picture
Next World Wins.
deal, one.
Yeah, like do
Yeah.
one Searchlight to Marvel or whatever. And Searchlight, we'll give you a big budget to do whatever the fuck you want. Whatever weird art house movie you want to make. We don't care if it makes money. Like
Yeah.
go do that. And I with this movie especially, I'm just like, oh damn, they bought this at Sundance. So like that's really, really cool. So I'm totally down for that. Joe, thank you for joining me. I really love talking to you about movies anytime. So I really appreciate that you came in and filled in for Eric for this.
Oh, yeah,
What have you
so
been
fun.
up to? Where can people find you?
Um, up to, we, as Matt said, we just finished Planet of the Apes interview, which was my first watch of all of them, so that was such
So
a
good.
treat before seeing the Batman. Other than that, just hanging out on youtube.com/kindafunny. We have our Turning Red review going up next Friday. So we'll be watching that. Other than that, I have no idea what else is coming out. I'm sure we're going to be doing like a bunch more of our like what you've been watching. I finished After Party. I've been watching Severance on Apple TV. Just trying to catch
Nice.
up on stuff. I've been watching Girls for the first time because I somehow
I
missed
love
that the
I mean,
first time around.
I do like Girls a lot.
It is a guilty pleasure. I don't know that it's
Yes.
good, but it is entertaining to watch, and especially
It's
now
another
with
one of
like,
those shows. Go ahead.
oh,
Sorry.
with like a few years in between, like some of the stuff has aged really well and is very funny, and some of it hasn't, which
Not so
also
much.
makes it funny.
Adam
But it's
Driver
fun.
in that show is it's so funny seeing that and then going, man, that guy became like a huge movie star. That's incredible.
Yeah, and I keep telling these people, like, I can't imagine people watching Girls and being like, "He's gonna be in the new Star Wars." That guy?
He's gonna work with every giant filmmaker and
I
be in like
know.
a bunch of things. And like, yeah, it's just another one of those shows where like everyone on this is kind of awful, but you're
Totally.
just like fascinated by them.
Yeah.
Um,
It's like, who's your favorite
yeah,
character? I don't know. They all kind of suck.
yeah, but they're great to watch. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, if you guys, like I mentioned, you guys can check out our other shows, which is Untitled Movie Reviews. If you want to see kind of our review for Turning Red, the Batman, we just put out our spoiler-free and spoiler-filled version, so you guys can go check those out. As well as the Untitled Movie Podcast, our recent draft. I forget. I don't have anything up. I'm like, I don't know what we talked about last episode, but you guys can check it out. I'm sure there's something. The Batman spoiler cast is on the main feed, so you guys can check that out there. That was replacing a normal episode this week. But as always, my name is Matt Rohrbeck. You can find more of my work around the internet, but mostly at untitledmoviepodcast.com. And you can start seeing my work on Family Feud Canada very, very
Hell
soon.
yeah.
I don't know when one of my questions will actually make a game, but I will let everyone know because I'll probably have some screening party for one question I get. I'll be like, yeah. And you can follow me on all those social medias at that's Eric's at Matt Rohrbeck. You can follow Eric at EM6211. Check out his review of Fresh over on rogerstv.com/cinemascene. And until next time, nom 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 nom.